Hello and welcome to Peggy's Plants, coming to you from Central Florida. Today I'll be showing you how I propagated my Monstera Deliciosa Albo. My first experience with the Monstera Albo didn't go well. I overpaid for a cutting that wasn't rooted and I rotted it and it died. So this time I decided to order from an Indonesian seller and I imported this Monstera Albo. This is footage from the unboxing. I was not real thrilled about it because, as you can see here, they literally folded the leaves. Yes, I'm talking serious creases and everything. They folded the leaves of the plant. It was cheaper than it would have cost in the States, but it was by no means cheap. It was more than I had ever paid for a plant. So I was a little disappointed in the condition and the size of the plant. But the big deal for me was having a rooted plant. So this is what I received in terms of roots. Again, I wasn't real impressed. I purchased this as a rooted plant, and as you can see here, it's more like just a rooted cutting. So again, I was a little disappointed, but at least I had roots on this plant. So I figured this time I might have some success with this Monstera Albo. In mid-January of 2021, which was 7.5 months, this is what the plant looked like. As you can see, there is some growth, but not a lot for a 7-month period, especially over the warmer months. This is the original leaf, and as you can see, it's shooting off in the total opposite direction of all the other leaves. I did turn this pot constantly to see if I could get this leaf to come over to the other side, and no matter what, it did not. So this plant is very wonky. I was very disappointed, not impressed at all with my Monstera Albo, but at least it had started giving me some new growth. It gave me a couple of leaves, although it was growing extremely slow. I was going to go ahead and propagate it, and I noticed something. If you take a look on the other side of this plant, you will see that there are aerial roots that are headed towards the soil. Seeing these aerial roots was a beautiful sight to me, because with the aerial roots growing down towards the soil, I'm going to encourage them to continue to do so. And even in terms of, if I need to, I will bend the root to guide it into the soil of the pot. And then that way, at the end of that aerial root, roots will grow. So I'm going to do all of that without cutting this plant at all, so that by the time I do cut this plant to propagate it, it'll be 2 rooted cuttings. That's the hope anyway. So I like to use this method because it's less likely to end up with a rotting situation, and especially with the Monstera Deliciosa, given what they cost and how picky they can be when it comes to rooting them. So I'm going to show you how things turned out. From these little aerial roots here, I'm going to dump out all the soil and I'll show you what I ended up with. In October of 2021, I was finally satisfied that the plant probably had enough of a root system to propagate. I tugged on the aerial roots that were growing down in the soil, and they were firm in there. So I knew that the aerial roots had grown a root system at the bottom. And as you can see here, I have a couple more leaves on this plant. I was a little concerned about the amount of white I was getting in the variegation, but it's a beautiful plant, and I want to have a propagation just in case I do lose one part of this plant due to the variegation or lack of variegation. So looking at these roots, this was the aerial root that went down into the soil. I've washed all the soil from the pot so that you can see, from the roots so you can see the roots, but look at all of that. That alone could easily sustain the top or the bottom portion of this plant. And with all of these roots, I feel like I am very confident that I can propagate this plant and not have to worry about waiting for the plant to root, worrying about it rotting or anything like that, since it already has a root system that can sustain it and it's ready to go. So now I'm just figuring out where I want to cut this plant. I want to make sure I leave plenty of roots on both ends so that the plant is nice and healthy. And I really want it to thrive. Hopefully I'll end up with two very nice Monstera albos. And now I see exactly where I'm going to cut this plant. So I have some scissors that I have cleaned with alcohol. And I know a lot of people say don't use scissors because they can crush the stem. But I use scissors. So, you know, if you want to use a knife or whatever, do that. And hold on, let me turn this around so that you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to go between the two roots here, between the aerial roots. And now you just can see my hand. Let me see. Here we go. And I'm just going to cut it right in here. It's a little harder than I thought it would be. This is freaking me out a little bit. And here we go. Just do it. Okay. Ooh, I was holding my breath on that one. And here is the top cutting. And you can see the roots connected to the aerial roots. So nice root system here. And this is the bottom cutting. So let me see if I can show you these roots. This has a lot of roots on it. So as you can see, I have two Monstera albos that are well rooted. And the nice thing is I never had to worry about losing the plant because I couldn't root it or because the roots rotted. Now, this is the bottom cutting. It has 3 leaves on it and well rooted. I decided to put both of these in leca. This is the top cutting. I put them both in leca, which is something I've been using for many years. It's what I'm comfortable with. Do what you're comfortable with, by all means. And this is what this plant looks like. It's just basically, the plant is just kind of laying on the top of the leca. And the only portions that are in contact with the leca or under the leca buried are the roots. This plant has enough roots at the end of that, or at the end of that aerial root, to sustain this plant. I have no doubt at all. So you can see there, that's the aerial root that has all the roots on it. And the rest of the plant is just kind of sitting on top. And let me just show you. That's where the cutting was taken. There's the other aerial root, and that is all that is buried in this pot. And this plant should do just fine. So I did both of them that way, just buried the aerial roots, set the plant on top. I left it downstairs for a while in front of a window where it would get bright light. And they didn't shrivel up. I didn't lose any leaves or anything like that, but I wasn't getting any growth either. They're doing fine, but I wasn't getting any growth. So after a few weeks, I decided to take them upstairs to the plant room and see what we could do to stimulate some growth. We'll start off by taking a look at what the bottom cutting now looks like. The bottom cutting is just sitting in my in my plant room under a grow light. No humidifier or anything like that, but it has experienced a lot of growth. Let's take a closer look here at the plants. Now, the roots are like really anchored into the leca now. It's like I tug on them a little bit to see, you know, if they've found their way and the plant is anchored. And these two aerial roots that put off all those roots is definitely anchored in this pot now. So I wouldn't doubt that they've grown even more. And if you take a further look at this plant, it's got new growth points coming out And as you can see, it also has some new aerial roots coming out headed towards the soil. So I could potentially propagate this cutting again, doing it the same way. Taking a look at the foliage, yes, we have some new leaves. This green one is a nice size. It's, got a little marbling in it, so it's not all white, so that kind of made me feel a little better. And the latest leaf is this white one that's coming out. And you see that little growth point there? So it looks like I'm getting something going there. So I'm really pleased with the growth on this plant. Now, this bottom cutting has shown more growth than this plant ever did before I propagated. And I had this plant, I was saying 1 year, but I think it's more like 2 years that I've had this plant, and it just really hadn't done much of anything. And now that I've propagated it, I've done nothing special to it other than the propagating, and look at the leaves that it has put out already. Now let's take a look at the top cutting after 1 month. For no particular reason, I treated this a little bit differently. I left it in my grow tent rather than having it in the plant room on the shelf. And as you can see, I potted it up in leca, just as I did the bottom cutting. Only the tips of the aerial roots are buried under the leca. And as you can see, the stem is just kind of sitting on top of the leca. Actually, it's kind of hovering because it has some aerial roots that are holding it up. And those aerial roots are rooting. So I could potentially come back later and cut, again, and propagate this plant. And if you take a look here, I have new foliage. Look at the number of leaves on this cutting. Now, it did give me one all white leaf. Of course, I'm going to have to cut that off. It's going to just brown and die off, but it's giving me some leaves with more color as well. Looking at the stem, the plant should be okay. There's enough marbling in the stems that I think I will be okay. But I can feel right here that another leaf will be coming out here soon. So I'm just really excited. I went from one plant that hadn't done anything in a couple of years to 2 cuttings that have grown more than the mother plant ever had. So I'm very pleased with this propagation. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps you if you're interested in propagating your Monstera Albo. I know how scary that can be, but good luck to you. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.